Minister denied last week.
Order. Leaver sought to table that particular page of the document. Is there any objection? There is objection. Order. Question number 7. Order. Honourable Phil Goff. Question number 7.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Defence. Will he rule out further cuts to personnel numbers in the New Zealand Defence Force and cuts to the inshore patrol vessel fleet? If not, what cuts are being considered?
Honourable Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, there are no plans to reduce the personnel numbers in the New Zealand Defence Force and no plan to reduce the number of inshore patrol vessels. Furthermore, no cuts to capability are being considered.
Speaker,
supplementary question.
Supplementary.
Honourable
if there are no plans to cut the inshore patrol vessels, why did the Chief of Defence Force, Rhys Jones, say on Sunday that reducing the inshore patrol vessel fleet was an option? And was that because there will be further cost cutting, or was it because he simply can't put all the ships to sea because he doesn't have the trained personnel to staff them and the Aussies want their seconded sailors back?
Honourable
Speaker, there's a number of limbs to that question. The first thing is the CDF's remarks were taken out of context. He was talking about the long-term view out to 2035. As regards putting ships to sea, both frigates are at sea. The IPVs, 3 of the 4, are ready to deploy, and the 2 OPVs are at sea. And if that member thinks there are too many IPVs, I would remind him that he was the one that bought them.
Supplementary question, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Speaker, just so we can get it clearly on the House's record, will the Minister categorically rule out any further cuts in Defence Force numbers after the reduction that he made of more than 1,000 in the Defence Force last year?
Honourable Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, numbers go up and down, but the numbers where they are at the moment are about right. We look at a long-term regular Defence Force of 8,500 to 9,000, which is the range currently, and there's no plans to reduce that.
Mr. Speaker,
question, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Speaker, when the Minister was warned in the latest Defence Force ongoing attitude survey, not yet made public, that, quote, the combination of current levels of morale and organisational commitment poses potential risk to individual performance and attrition, end quote, why does he continue to deny that these factors could have contributed to the catalogue of errors that led to the death of Private Michael Ross?
Well,
Honourable Jonathan Coleman.
Mr. Speaker, we've talked about this previously, and I categorically deny that morale issues are anything to do with what was a very tragic accident. I'd also go on to say that 77% of people across the Defence Force rate morale in the workplace as satisfactory or better, and 70% rate their own morale as satisfactory or better, a lot better than I suggest you'd find in the Labour caucus right now.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Honourable Phil Goff.
Mr. Speaker, when there's so much emphasis on cost-saving and cost-cutting in the New Zealand Defence Force, why is the Defence Force continuing to pay Commodore Kevin Keat $225,000 a year when he was suspended months ago, and it would take the Minister 10 minutes to find out whether he did fraudulently fill out the high-level security vetting form?
Honourable Jonathan Coleman. Order. The member asked a supplementary question. I certainly want to hear the answer if the member himself doesn't. Honourable Jonathan Coleman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that member...
Speaker, I was responding to an interjection from the Minister of Justice, as you yourself heard, and your response was unbalanced.
Order. Order. There were interjections. There were too many interjections from around the House, including also not only the member, but other members of his caucus. Let's now hear the answer. I think that's a reasonable point Mr. Goff has made.
Mr. Speaker.
Point of order, Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr. Speaker, your response again failed to note that Judith Collins set off those interjections.
Order. I didn't note that, but where I noted the loudest objection or interjection coming from was the member who's just raised the point of order. I'm going to ask the member, Honourable Phil Goff, to ask his question because we now have discontinuity.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My supplementary question to the Minister of Defence is this. When there is so much being said about cost-cutting and cost-saving in the New Zealand Defence Force, why is the New Zealand Defence Force continuing to pay Commodore Kevin Keat $225,000 a year when he was suspended months ago, and it would take the Minister 10 minutes to find out whether or not he inaccurately and falsely filled out his high-level security vetting form?
Order. Honourable Jonathan
Well, Mr
Coleman.
Speaker, that member seems to be calling for me to override a legal process, and Mr Keat deserves the benefit of natural justice. And there's a process to follow, there are legal issues, and that member knows very well that it has to follow the prescribed process. And I would challenge him, if he wants to go outside the chamber and say that Mr Keat is guilty and should be sacked, he should have the guts to do that.
Order. Order. I will have a point of order from Honourable Clayton Cosgrove first.
Mr Speaker, I think if you analyse pretty simply that last remark, that was grossly out of order. To accuse a member of not having guts, there is many, many precedents for that, and speakers have thrown members out for that.
I think on balance that is an absolutely fair point of order, and I ask the Minister to rise and withdraw the last part of his answer.
I withdraw and apologise for that last part.
Point of order, Right Honourable.
Mr Speaker, as you were seeking to correct the offence, Mr Tauhenare decided to add to it by shouting out words which confirmed he believed it was true. He should be asked to apologise, wash his mouth out and leave the House.
Order. If Mr Tauhenare stood and said that, I ask him to stand, withdraw and apologise as well.
I apologise.
Withdraw.
And I withdraw.
Right. We now move to question number 8, Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Tourism and Arts